Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the third Frome Festival of Kindness. We're particularly pleased to have the hospitality of the football club here this evening. Thank you very much to the newly formed Community Benefit Society Committee, which, as many people know, has enabled together with the Frome Town Council, has enabled the pitch to be bought for community use, and there are big plans. Anyway, so it's really nice to be here. Particular thanks to Jess behind the bar, who's single-handedly put all the chairs out, and it's been endlessly obliging. So many thanks. So I'd like to introduce our very special guest here this evening. When we were thinking about planning the Frome Festival of Kindness, Alison and I, I'm Simon, by the way, had seen The Old Oak, Ken's latest film, and thought it has some really interesting things to say about the interpersonal kindness, but also the political context of that. So we asked whether Ken would come, and he's very kindly agreed to come here this evening. And it's not your first visit here, because you have been in the terraces, haven't you, at football matches?
I have been standing on the terraces of Frome Town, yes.
But you're really a Bath City man, aren't you?
It was...
So just in case there's anyone in the room who isn't aware of the stature of the man we have here, 57 films, is it? Something like that?
Yes, it depends on how you count them, really.
Well, indeed, yes. But undeniably there are 37 feature films, aren't there? Yes. Plus some documentaries, plus some commercial we won't go into. But also a very distinctive style of cinema that has had vast influence, not only on the world of cinema in this country and on television, but also it's contributed to such greater understanding of the failures of the social fabric in this country. It's a huge pleasure to have you here, Ken. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks so much. Now the food banks are rising. I think they rose 50% last year or the year before. I mean, it's massive. 500,000 kids don't eat unless we put an extra can in the collecting box in the supermarket. What kind of... It is a conscious cruelty. And the people who are making these rules, and they began under the Labour Party, so this is not a party political point. The people who make these rules know they are using hunger as a weapon to discipline the poorest and most vulnerable people in our society. Conscious cruelty, and done in our name. Make work pay. No, make the poorest pay. Now, that's what we collectively have chosen people. We've chosen people who we know will do that again. And next election, they'll be there. And neither party mentions that. And they know the consequences for, well, certainly millions of people now. Look at it on the global scale, and of course, nightly we witness the most appalling cruelty in Gaza. And yes, of course, every death is terrible, and yes, people on both sides have suffered. But the nightly cruelty is something else. And the starvation that we are witnessing is of a level of cruelty and everything else. Amputations without anaesthetic. Kids just dying in the street of hunger. And we are sending weapons to that war for it to continue. And neither of our parties, the leading politicians, will say, stop the killing now, no conditions. Stop the killing. And we will stop the weapons. No, they can't do it. And these are the people we elect. And we're good neighbours. We're good neighbours. You know, you're in trouble. If I'm in trouble, you'll come and help me. You know? You've offered to help me walk along here. Natural. It's what we do. How come we don't do it? How come we allow, in our name, weapons to go to kill people on that scale and drive them to hunger? Makes you think, why does this happen? Well, I grew up kind of came to politics and things and started making films in the 60s. And learned a bit about films and learned a bit about politics in the course of it. And joined the Labour Party in the early 60s, went and delivered leaflets for Harold Wilson, white heat of the new industrial revolution. We thought the world was going to change. It didn't change. It didn't change. And the new left arose. And I think these are many problems, small groups, bullying, terrible things happen. But the basic principles that we learned in that decade, I think have held true ever since. And they've been, for some of us, many of us, including me, they've been the guiding principles that we've tried to work to. And a fundamental point, a fundamental principle, well, it's a view of history really, is that at the heart of our society, we are riven by conflict, class conflict, essentially between those who sell their labour and those who take profit from it. And there's a conflict of interest, because the people who sell their labour need a secure income, they need somewhere to live, they need education for the kids, they need food on their table, they need pension when they're old, and they need an income that can provide that, and the social infrastructure that will generate that, will give them that. The people who are making profit are tied to an economic system which demands profit. If you're in a company and it doesn't make profit, the investment disappears, company fails. You have to make a profit. How do you make a profit? You make a profit by ensuring there's a gap between what you pay the labour to produce it and the money you can, and the what you gain for it. The difference, that's your profit. That is the priority, because you can't do anything if you don't make a profit. So the wages are they're dispensable. And so that essential conflict has driven the politics that I've observed in the 60 years since, 60 plus years. And just to give you one example, if it doesn't, the one example is the miners' strike. And well, first of all, an example of what was inherently best after the war was the idea of the welfare state, where we were good neighbours to each other. From the cradle to the grave was the commitment. I mean, older friends may remember that phrase. From the cradle to the grave, we would look after each other. And the National Health Service itself is an embodiment of that. We all chip in what we can, and when we're sick, it's there for free. It's there for everyone according to your medical need. I mean, an absolute epitome of kindness. It's the epitome of the good neighbour. We all chip in, right, number 23, sick, we all help, get you better. Makes sense. What has happened since? The attack on the welfare state, we've seen it dismantled. All the things we owned, gas, water, electric, trains, coal mines, steel, air traffic control, post office, all the things we owned, gone. We owned them together for our common good, gone. And of course, the work that ensues from it is the gig economy. No job security, work when the boss tells you, no guaranteed income. Everyone's struggling. Insecurity. Good if you want cheap labour, not good, not very kind. And the classic example was the miners' strike, which we're hearing about now, 40 years on. I mean, I guess many people remember it. But what is interesting in that is that when that government was elected in 1979, the 70s, and this is an example of, or the I guess more than an example, it's the epitome of why the welfare state had to be destroyed by the present political grouping on both sides. The 70s was the decade in which a greater percentage of the gross national product went to the ordinary people than any other decade before or since. Never been that proportion of our collective wealth went to ordinary people before. Never happened since. 79, a new government under a lady whose name I hesitate to mention, but some know who I'm talking about, Margaret Thatcher. She made it her task to reduce the cost of labour so that she can increase the profit margin for business, particularly big business. That meant reducing the power of unions, because they were strong, reducing the power of unions, and then they couldn't negotiate so well, so you reduce the cost of labour. She had a three-pronged attack. Take away the subsidies or the support for the industries, right across the board, and we see a lot of it happening now. I mean, the railway private companies get massive support, still massive support. I mean, the film industry, they announced massive support. Tax breaks for the Americans to come and tell us how to make films. So it's commonplace, right-wing government. They do it all the time. But Thatcher removed them all. Many factories closed, and unemployment went from 500,000, just over 500,000, to 3.5 million. Massive poverty, immediate insecurity, everybody anxious. That was the first thing. Second tactic was to provoke strikes that they knew they could win. They began with the steel workers who'd never struck since the general strike. Inflation was very high. I think it was, can't remember how much, 17, 18% or so. They were offered 2%, which is a massive wage cut. They came out on strike. Hopeless union leadership defeated. Other unions did deals. They sold jobs in return for the redundancy pay. The so-called union barons, not militant at all, sold jobs, and a lot of the workforce were very angry about it, but the union sold them out. The key ones, the miners were the most political, the most organised, the strongest. They left them till last. 84, the coal board, with a new director, hardline director, broke the agreement with the unions, closed the pit, so the union either had to strike, either had to accept it, in which case they were lost, because if they accept one, they'll accept others, or they go out on strike. And of course the government timed it, as summer was approaching, they timed it when they'd got massive coal stocks, they timed it when they'd fixed up ports, non-union ports. They'd organised it. And the third prong was anti-union legislation once they'd won. They did it. They won it. We know they won it. Interestingly, they got no support from the union leaders, who had already sold their jobs or been defeated, or from the labour leaders. Same as the general strike. No support from the labour leaders. Why? Because labour leaders know when they come back into government, they don't want to lead, they don't have to fight strong trade unions, because they also believe in profit for business. So that's the dilemma we've got. When you think of kindness in dealing with people, That's the dilemma. And of course, the miners, when they were, did massive support from the grassroots. Now, you see, there was kindness. I mean, I'm sure people in Frome, certainly people in where we were in Bath, even then, and there were concerts, and there was a rank of people in the street would collect. A lot of grassroots unions members would give support. People came and spoke. There were meetings like this. They would pass the hat around. Massive grassroots support from the top. Nothing. Kindness, cruelty. And what happened to the communities we know, from sustainable communities, wonderful communities with brass bands, with football teams, with shops, with community, this, that, and the other, collapsed. Drugs, closed shops, many families left, communities wiped out, consciously wiped out, because they were strong. They were political, yes, but they were strong people, stood on principle, internationalist. Didn't want that. Make certain they destroyed. And she did. And that's the epitome. You know, when you think of the qualities we want to encourage, that's what happened. And so, how do we get out of it, really? How do we get out of it? And I think it's tough, and it's tough now at this particular time. But I think, I mean, how do we get out of it? You tell me. I mean, you know, I'm the generation that are handing on to our grandchildren, great-grandchildren maybe one day, a world that is collapsing. And what have we done? This is the world our generation has handed on. But at least, I think, let's remember the old principles. Let's own our wealth together. Let's create an infrastructure that belongs to everyone. Let's have a health service not full of people ripping us off. You know, for profits, no privatization, no outsourcing. Water, let's own it. Let's own it. We can do it. We were strong enough to create the wealth, to create the resources. We have no problem with work and creating things and producing things and dividing the wealth fairly. We don't need to be ripped off in the process, because it's that conflict, that essential conflict, that demands profit at the expense of of our genuine support for each other and living together and sharing things. Because you can't share things that make can't share your profits. And to me, that's the essence of it. Simple, but having, say, battled over 65 years working and God knows what, I think we've got to get back to first principles. And Frome's not a bad example. Get rid of the shysters. Stand together for the main principles. Anyway, sorry, I spoke too long.
Thank you very much. I wanted to follow up on a few things you said there. What jumped into my mind immediately was last night we screened a film utterly different to your style called The Bank of Dave. Have you seen that? Yes. This is about a Burnley businessman who decides to try and set up his own bank to invest in the local community, support local businesses, create jobs. And he wants nothing to do with the commercial banking establishment. And it's based on a true story. And of course, the banks try to stop him, and it culminates in a court case which he eventually wins. And there is now something in Burnley called the Bank of Dave, and locally owned, circulating money in the local economy, investing in the kind of things your average bank wouldn't touch. Is that does that sound attractive to you?
Yes, it is. I think in the end, peaceful coexistence doesn't work, though, sadly.
Yeah.
I mean, look what happened to the co-op. You know, it began, the Rochdale pioneers, and began with the great ideas, but where is it now? It's just another supermarket. And in the end, the big players are so powerful that we have to take them on, I think. Yes, there will be good examples, but in the end, you know, it's like a sandcastle confronting the waves as the tide come in. You know, I think it will. I mean, well done, Dave. Absolutely. You know, we're man after my own heart, but I think the thing is we always forget our strength. You know that people organised at work. In the end, they can stop the wheels going round, and that's really where the power is, and that's why. That in the end, the exploiters don't need us. The exploiters do need us, rather. We don't need them. We don't need them because people do the work, and the people who do the work can stop the wheels going round. So there is real strength there, but it's how you organise that, and how you and understanding the enemy you're dealing with, and not as the so-called left politicians do, try to work with them, because they, in the end, they have a different, they march to a different tune.
Ken, your career, you've spoken now regularly on all kinds of things, but the primary strand of your career has been making films. As I said, 37 feature films, all these other things. Films which are angry, which are deeply critical of the social structure. The first one I remember very well myself was Cathy Come Home. I was 14 when that came on television. And I remember it particularly because my grandfather nearly had apoplexy when he saw this film. He said, "Who is this man, Loach?" You know, all the rest of it. But it really touched a nerve. And if you wanted to create a career of being a thorn in the side of the establishment, that was a brilliant start. But that had a big social impact, didn't it? I mean, it led to the foundation of shelter. It stimulated the existence of the housing, the development of the housing association movement. And it seems like a marvellous example of film as a force for social change. Do you think cinema still has that possibility of bringing about social change?
Well, I mean, it's we didn't. Shelter was on the way to being formed when we made the film. And in fact, the people who were the researchers and who were working on the project that became Shelter were the people who helped us with the film. And the Crisis was also being founded. So there was a mood, and we were just part of that mood. And it's interesting with Cathy, because Cathy was, when you look back, it made a change, but it was a very small change. It was a change that the system could accommodate. At the time, councils didn't have to house husbands. So a family would be homeless. Mother and children would be housed in appalling accommodation. Like in a hospital ward, there'd just be like round a bed, you know, a curtain, and that was a mother and children. The husbands weren't accommodated, and so they married. They would go away, and sometimes families split up, and it was a terrible way to treat a family. But the system could accommodate that. That was the change. And we went. Whereas, what you do is more radical, that is, you go to the root, then that's not welcome. And we did a whole series called Days of Hope shortly after that, which is about the labour movement in the early in the early part of the 20th century, from the First World War to the general strike in 26. Not repeated. Shown once, never repeated again. And I think there is a limit. And that was the tolerant 60s. In the 80s, I did documentaries on what was going on the trade union, on the trade union leaders who were effectively colluding with Thatcher, while at the same time being denounced as destructive union barons, ruling the country. Nothing could be further from the truth. We did documentaries about that. They were banned because even the people who spoke of them were ordinary workers, never been on television before. But they weren't allowed to speak because the state wasn't too certain which way the battle was going to go. They were called questions of leadership, made for Channel 4. They were banned. Just said, no, we're not showing them. 2 years' work down the spout. Did a documentary on the miners' strike for the South Bank show. And that was in the August of 84. It showed the pictures of police brutality that you're now seeing in the documentaries now. That was banned by ITV because they wouldn't allow you to see. They said, I had to do it about, tried to everywhere to do a documentary on the miners' strike. It was such a huge event. And eventually was taken on to do a document about the songs and poems of the miners' strike. There were huge creative output, huge creative...
Ken, hold the microphone a bit closer.
Okay, yeah, huge creative output at the time. Some were really brilliant, and some were doggerel, of course, but I mean, written with a passion. And so we did all these, and a lot of them were writing about brutality, police brutality. And we got the pictures, some you're seeing now. And when we showed it, they said, well, we're not showing that. I said, why not? He said, well, we're not showing the police hitting the miners. I said, well, that's what they're writing about. If it was in Latin America, you wouldn't wait to show it. No, we're not showing it. And it was banned. Eventually, it went out a month before the strike ended. And we had one hilarious conversation on Channel 4. It went out on Channel 4. The head of constabulary from Northumberland came on. And he said, I've got a complaint to make. It was a studio discussion, him and me and someone else. He said, I've got a complaint to make. I said, oh, what's that? He said, you put a sound when the policeman, on that bit of footage, you put a sound on the what was happening of the truncheon, made it sound worse. I said, well, okay. So well, you tell me, what does it sound like when you hit a mine with your truncheon? And of course, it ended the conversation because the evidence was there, but they wouldn't show it. And of course now, sorry, I'm going on a bit, but it's really interesting this about what you can say, what you can't, and how they rewrite history. Because now you can, like with Hillsborough, they 40 years on, yes, the police were too heavy-handed. Shocking, terrible. She should apologise. 40 years on. At the time, the only news story you heard was picket line violence. Older folks, again, will remember this. Picket line violence, Kate Adie. I remember her broadcasting about picket line violence. The reality was the other way. They were in T-shirts and gym shoes, and police were all in gear. And the other way. But what they are saying now, and this is really interesting, in the documentaries you're seeing now of the strike, it's all about the miners fighting each other. It's about the Notts miners who founded their own union, the UDM, organised by the government, like a freelance right-winger called David Hart. helped them organise it. That's the Notts miners, and the Yorkshire and South Wales and Scots and more militant ones fighting, saying you've got to go on strike. And but that's the main thing. No, the main thing was how I tried to describe it was the determination to weaken trade unions and the strongest trade union of all to be destroyed. They never mention that, which is the true reality of the politics of the time. So it's very strange, both what they allow us to see now and apologise for, and the analysis they will not allow to be heard, is really interesting. And that's how they keep control. And it's very interesting when, we are compared very favourably with Russia. Now, I certainly wouldn't want to live in Russia. But the idea that we have this free and democratic medium and TV and broadcasting is a fiction. Because the BBC is like the British ruling class, urbane, self-deprecating, happy to laugh at itself. But come when the chips are down, absolutely ruthless. One of the directors who worked with us on the Wednesday play those early days was blacklisted. His career was cut short. He died just recently, Roy Battersby. You will never work for the BBC again because of your politics. So much for the tolerance of the BBC.
Can I just ask you a couple of questions about the film we're going to see tonight? Yes, and thank you for giving so much of your time. It's great. It strikes me one aspect of kindness that stood out for me in this film is the role of kindness in promoting solidarity across barriers and between different groups. Is that a fair thing to see in this film, do you think?
Yes, well I hope so. It's the old tradition of solidarity, really. I guess I prefer solidarity to kindness. I mean, kindness is implicit, but it is that shared solidarity that was second nature to people who work down the pit because your life depended on the guy next to you. And mutual support, and your strength is mutual support. And that's very real, and it's when we were researching the film, it was very real in the ex-mining villages where we shot. Mm-hmm. So yes, that's very real, but also the danger in those areas now and everywhere is what we see is the rise of the far right. The rise of racism. I mean, they're having to talk about it, but the rise of racism. And how it is being fed by, we don't want foreigners. We're flooded with foreigners. The biggest threat to our survival are the small boats in the channel. That's the biggest threat, not climate change, not nothing else, not your incompetence. It's just small boats, and then because people bite, and we know it's in the press. We know it's echoed in TV, and that bears fruit, and the fruit is where we shot in northeast England is traditionally is a very white area. I mean, they don't see many people from other ethnic backgrounds because that's not been part of their history. But nevertheless, the racism appears, and when the difficulty is when it's based on a just cause, people have been neglected, people are left poor, people have their value of their houses has gone right down. They've got nothing. And then they're being asked to share what little they have with people who have nothing but the trauma of a war. Yet other areas, much richer, they don't have the refugees. Wonder why. And again, so there's a grain of truth in what they say, but it leads into racism rather than leading into solidarity. And in a way, that's the struggle in this film. It's that struggle between the memory of solidarity and keeping it alive. and the anger and the bitterness of having been betrayed, and where that can lead to. And it's a very real conflict. Mm-hmm. I mean, Farage did well up there. Tommy Robinson, the English Defence League or whatever he is. I mean, he holds meetings up there. So it's as he holds them everywhere. But it's dangerous, and so in a way that's the story we wanted to tell, really.
Final question from me. Just this is really about the way you make these film like this. I think everyone will be astonished by the performance, if that's the right word, of Elba Amari in this, the Syrian woman, who is not a professional actress, I think. Is that right?
She
may be now. But
Ebla's, she's from occupied Syria. She insists on saying she's from the Golan Heights, but she has acted before.
Uh-huh.
A terrific woman, young woman, very principled. She's in the film. She photographs. She's a photographer. And it just so happens that the photographer that we've worked with on our film, still photographer, is a very fine photographer called Josh Barrett, who happens to be in the audience tonight, and who taught Ebla how to be a photographer. And in a way, that was the best part of her preparation. Josh's pictures are in the film towards the end. And one or two of them, I think I'm right, if I remember right, are one or two that Ebla took herself under Josh's guidance. So he's a Frome resident now, so really, and a great friend and comrade. Yes, so that, but the others are not actors. Some are stand-up comedians. But working with people who haven't had necessarily experience in front of a camera, have many other experiences, and are able to create a fictional situation to make it real. And in the end, that's the test. Do you believe these people? And I think often films are not sharp enough in saying, do I really believe this person is who they say they are in the film? Do I really believe this guy is a man behind a pub, or a working man or working woman or a cleaner or whatever it is, or are they pretending? And I think you have to be as tough with your self-criticism in that as if you're making a documentary. You say, if I saw this person in the documentary, if this guy came to my house and said he's come to fix the plumbing, would I believe him, or does he look like a film actor to me? And you've got to be really, which is just what we've tried to do, and then find people who really can create something together. And we've been remarkably lucky, but there's extraordinary talent among people. And the great thing about film acting, sorry, just one last word, the great thing about film acting, you just have to capture it once. It's a moment of truth, and you can see it behind the eyes. You can see the process of thinking, and you can see the hesitation or the uncertainty for real, and you see surprise. And the number of surprises in this that the people in it didn't know were going to happen. And that's only even the finest actors find very hard to act, because there's that shock is one moment, and you only get it once. And if a film can capture that, that's the gold, really. Sorry, I'm struggling here. So that's just what we're trying to do, really. And it's been an extraordinary adventure.
Thank you very much indeed.
you very much. When I saw Simon at Frome Voices and he asked me to come along this evening, I said, yeah, that's fine. I wasn't quite sure what he wanted me to do. I have to say, this has been, if not the highlight, if not one of the highlights, the highlight of the year for me. To actually meet Ken and have a conversation with him, and we talked about football and we talked about other things and what have you. Just so amazing. But very quickly, because I only want to go and watch the film apparently, I'd just like to say thank you to Simon for organising this evening and all the people behind that have helped him. A big thank you to Alison, all that she's done and her team and everybody else, supporters, volunteers and so on. And a big thank you to you all for turning up this evening. Just an amazing inspirational talk. And it was so kind for you to come to Frome, and we are very, very pleased that you were able to come this evening, and it's just been an absolutely amazing, inspirational talk. Simon has a gift, and
from the Kindness Festival.
From the Kindness Festival, and I actually wasn't the first person to meet Ken in my family. I have someone sat over there who met Ken quite a few years ago at Kilmerston Film Club, and so we have a gift from the Kindness Film Festival, and we have a gift from Frome. So if Karen would like to present Ken, please.
Oh, wow.
I don't get to say it.
Thanks very much. That's really extraordinarily kind of you. And thanks for coming and watching the film. And I hope Frome get promoted this year. Okay. All the best. Thanks very much.